Since 2016, lawmakers in 45 states have considered around 220 bills that would potentially silence protesters, according to the International Center for Not-for-Profit Law. 30 states have enacted some of those bills. Ohio was among those that approved laws to crack down on protesting near pipelines and other infrastructure. Other states have passed limits on public employees' ability to picket, banned people from wearing masks or hoods to conceal their identities, and toughened penalties on those who trespass on private property, block traffic, or interfere with first responders. There are 4 bills that Ohio lawmakers are looking over to create new offenses and penalties for actions while interacting with law enforcement. Supporters say they're in the interest of public safety, but opponents see them as a crackdown on free speech as people protest police violence. Statehouse correspondent Andy Chow reports.
Republican lawmakers in the House and Senate have proposed bills that expand the definition of obstruction of justice, create new riot-based violations, and allow police officers to file civil action lawsuits against people who file a false complaint. Representative Jeff LaRae is co-sponsor of HB 22, which would allow someone to be charged with obstruction of justice if they disobey a, quote, lawful order while interfering with a police officer during an arrest.
The intent of this bill is not to infringe upon individuals' freedom of speech and assembly, and we both support these rights and believe they are fundamental for our republic. However, violence is not protected and should not be tolerated. The provision of what constitutes an obstruction of justice found in the bill will create a deterrent on actions that escalate situations into violence by making it a punishable crime to interfere with the duties of a law enforcement officer after a lawful order is given.
Michael Weinman, with the Fraternal Order of Police of Ohio, says the bill would create clearer language in state law on the penalties for intervening with law enforcement.
Officers making an arrest or taking other enforcement action are increasingly becoming subjects to threats, shoves, kicks, and punches. They are being struck by everything from frozen water bottles, stones, bricks, homemade shields, chemical sprays, fireworks, and laser pointers.
LaRae says his bill is about day-to-day operations of police, and an amendment was added to ensure bystanders would still have the ability to record video of officers arresting others or performing other actions. But many opponents see HB 22 and the other pieces of legislation as a direct attack on the demonstrations that happened around Ohio last year to protest the police killings of black people, including George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. Zachary Reed, former Cleveland City Council member who's running for mayor, was among those protesters last year. He says demonstrations were peaceful and civil disobedience broke out when provoked by police.
It's not the Third Amendment, it's not the Fifth Amendment, it's the First Amendment. We have the freedom of speech. And on that day, on May 30th, we exercise our freedom of speech. And on that day, if this legislation, in my opinion, would have gone forth, I would be a felon.
Joe Mallory with the Cincinnati NAACP says there are already enough laws that handle such crimes.
Citizens should always have the right to respectfully question and challenge the actions that are excessive and abusive. Lawmakers must cease and desist from the attempts to strip away rights that are protected under the First Amendment of the Constitution.
HB 109 would create new offenses such as riot assault and riot vandalism, which come with tougher penalties and felony charges. SB 16 creates various new offenses and increased penalties for actions such as assault, harassment, or intimidation of police officers, along with other first responders. And SB 41 would allow public safety entities to incur costs by making protesters pay restitution, for example, if they damage property. While testifying against HB 22, the obstruction of justice bill, MICAH DERRY with the conservative Americans for Prosperity says lawmakers are continuing a problematic trend of overcriminalization.
Statute already covers the illegal acts that occurred during last summer's events, and the fact that many criminals were not apprehended and prosecuted for their deeds does not seem to justify the creation of new penalties and the enhancement of existing ones. Assessing a situation wherein a great many illegal acts occurred and reaching the conclusion that we simply need more criminal penalties seems to miss the point.
DERRY, who was among those protesting last year, said instead of creating and increasing penalties, the legislature should focus on creating police reform that address the concerns of the demonstrators. The bills are still in House and Senate committees. Andy Chow, Statehouse News Bureau.